Everybody, welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Lovers. I'm the CEO and Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. You may also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, quarterly magazine, and also a bi-weekly newsletter and a website. And I'm also the architect of the SCM IT SOP map. Probably a lot of people will know that. In the next hour live, we have a 60-minute live webinar, and we talk about S&OP and about maturity models, how we evolve in S&OP. And with me, I have two experts. First, you see me on the left side, and in the middle, Sandeep Walia. He's a Chief Transformation Officer of Slimstock. Welcome. And Sandeep, maybe you can explain briefly about your background. So what is your background, where you come from, and what is your experience, so people will know what to expect from your side.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, so my name is Sandeep, with Slimstock since 2 years. But before that, almost 18 years in supply chain world. Started my career with L'Oreal, then had the opportunity to work in Sephora and Adidas. Spent a couple of years in Blue Yonder, and now I'm with Slimstock. Incidentally, I'm also one of the ex-customers of Slimstock, so I had the opportunity to design and deploy the solution, and very happy to be here today.
Okay. So welcome. And next, Mike Donnelly, welcome. Could you explain a bit briefly about your background?
Yep. Hi, Martin. So my background, I've been with Slimstock for 8 years. So 2016. And prior to that, I spent 20 years in commercial roles within high street retail in the UK. So I'm a retailer first and foremost. And in my pre-Slimstock role, I was the other side of the fence, implementing software and being the customer. So the move to Slimstock has been interesting, seamless. I think, certainly what we do from a retail and supply chain is never a dull moment. But yeah, the last 8 years I've been started as a consultant. Now I lead the customer success and the pre-sales team at Slimstock UK. I love it.
All right, so welcome. So some practical stuff. So the audience is on mute. This webinar will be recorded. The PDF will be made available within 48 hours. So like I said, the audience is on mute. There are two ways to interact with us. So you have the chat function on the right-hand side. You can use that, and everybody can connect and respond to that. But I would like to prefer to get the questions via the Q&A functionality on the right-hand side. You see the small text bubbles. So if the questions are in line of the conversation I will be having with Sandeep and Mike, I will ask this question immediately. If not, there is a Q&A at the end, so I will reserve the questions for later on. So after 5 o'clock CET, so after the whole hour, we have an extra 30 minutes, what we call the after talk in a virtual lounge. So Sandeep, Mike, and myself will be available at table 1. So you can join us over there if you have more questions, if you want to have a direct conversation with one of us. So as of this point, we will put off the camera for a few reasons that have to do with bandwidth, but also you can enlarge your screen so you have a better view on the slides. Okay, so like I said, I'm the architect of the SCM IT SOP map, and I won't go into it in detail. Probably a lot of people will know it. There are different SOP lines, ERP, WMS, TMS, but also S&OP. And basically, we have created this overview with all the established supply chain software vendors in Europe. So this is based on implementation numbers, so proven track record, and of course Slimstock is also positioned over there since years, and it started out with inventory management and into demand and forecasting, and now it's expanding into S&OP, but also in production scaling, production planning. Sorry, not production scaling. So basically, Slimstock has evolved. And next to Slim 4, they have created an S&OP module since the last few years. Sandeep, anything to ask about this positioning and Slimstock in your side?
Yeah, we are in business since last 30 years now, and we started with a main focus on the distribution and retail part of supply chain with the inventory optimization, sales forecasting. Then the focus shifted to more demand and supply planning, S&OP, IBP, and lately we are working on capabilities around production planning because our customer base is also shifting more upstream. So we still have our traditional customer base of distribution, wholesale, and retail, but we have more and more manufacturing or co-manufacturing customers for which we are basically developing the production planning modules.
Mike, something to add?
I think it's fair to say in the last 2 years, certainly last 2 or 3 years, we've had more conversations starting around S&OP, and the S&OP being a gateway into commercial conversations about what we do. So I think we've always adapted to the market over the last 30 years. And I think pandemic, COVID taught everybody that supply chain resilience is what people need to have in position. And I think S&OP delivers that.
All right, and talking about COVID, so we created with Supply Chain Media this slide, and it's also evolving. So, you see the numbered black swans: COVID, war in Ukraine, Gaza, and CBAM. So CSRD is already known, but a lot of companies, CBAM, cross-border administrative methodology, was coming in last October. For some companies, it was a surprise. So basically, if you are importing metal from Vietnam, you have to pay carbon duties to import it into Europe. So basically, that's it. And my take for this is the next black swan this year probably will be the election of Trump. I don't hope so, but that could be a black swan, and it will have a lot of ripples. So basically, what this slide is saying, you have all experienced it. You have COVID lockdowns, shortages, all kind of bullwhips. And with the war in Ukraine, gas supply was a problem, leading to a lot of costs, extra costs, and inflation. And with Gaza, you see now the Red Sea has been blocked, and now all the ships have to sail, not through the Suez Canal, but around Africa, and that has also an implication of costs, etc. And CBAM has also a lot of implications. The main take on this, so since COVID, we have seen bullwhips and ripple effects both on the supply side and on the demand side. So basically, we see all kind of volatility on both sides. And basically, I think that's the reason why S&OP is necessary, because all this volatility on both sides is creating a lot of ripples in supply chain. And my vision is this won't go away. So people want to expect we get back to normal, not in the next 10 years. So Mike, what is your take on this?
I think I did a video last week, an internal video, and someone asked me about how we can bring tranquility to supply chain. And my response was, will never be tranquility. Supply chains are, they'll always be black swan. There'll always be events that you have to respond to. And one thing supply chain is boring, because there are so many things that impact you on a day-to-day basis. And the best companies, those that expect their black swan, they build in mitigation plans to respond to them. And the companies that struggle the most are those that are almost blind. So I think it's a really nice slide to say tranquility is never coming in supply chain. Maybe the best you can get is harmony, and you can plan for black swans rather than simply respond to them. Yeah,
and you have to sail on these waves. I think
Exactly.
and pre-COVID, I think we had Fukushima in 2011, etc. But then we had enough supply. But in the next 10 years, we'll see there will be shortages in supply capacity, raw materials. So this shortages in capacity and also in personnel won't go away. So getting back, so the topic of this webinar, S&OP. So these are my observations. I've been writing S&OP, doing a lot of interviews since the last 15 years. So basically, to sum up, it is a cross-functional meeting. It's a process, a decision-making process. You need executive participation. So that's why you see the CEO in the middle at the table. It started out balancing demand and supply. But we have moved on. We'll talk about it later. And for a lot of companies, it started out like a poker game. So the salespeople are sweating when they being asked, what should be the forecast of next month or next quarter, and they, were overselling and bluffing. So that's why the sales might be sweating a lot. And this is my take a few years ago, but it's still taking place. Still a lot of use of Excel spreadsheets. So Sandeep, what's your observation from L'Oreal experience in lately?
No, it was pretty much the same. The key focus was executive participation and balancing demand and supply. It was less of a poker game as we matured, but in the beginning, yes, it was pretty much like that.
Yeah, right. So maybe you can tell us what should be the approach for S&OP?
I think the best way to describe it is by asking the question, what is the difference between management and leadership? Management is doing the things right, and leadership is doing the right things. And this is pretty much the way S&OP is approached also by the organizations. A lot of companies, when they embark on their S&OP journey, they don't follow the holistic approach. So either they start with the people and process and the tech bit is missing, or they think that tech will solve all the problem and they will have end-to-end streamlined, efficient, fluid processes, but they don't focus on the people, behavior, governance part of it. So the right approach to S&OP or IBP is to basically always take into account the people, behavior, governance bit, which is the biggest, I would say, a deal breaker. Technology is always an enabler for the processes and never the magic solution. So the right way of doing S&OP is to approach it holistically and address the people, process, and tech component at the same time.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm the creator of the IT super map. So 10, 20 years ago, there was warehouse management systems, WMS. So now all of a sudden, and you could implement it, etc., because you are building a new warehouse, so you need it. But now all of a sudden there was S&OP software. So people were saying, I need it, so just implement it. But that's not enough.
I think the key difference between WMS tech and S&OP tech is that WMS is a supply chain function, whereas S&OP, it is a cross-functional, enterprise-wide process, right? You need finance, you need supply chain, you need commercial teams, marketing teams. If you are a production house, then research and innovation teams. So S&OP, just by having a technology would not mean that we'll be able to implement it. Whereas WMS, if we have the right tech, the scope is limited. The scope is supply chain operations, so it is relatively easy to implement. The cross-functional enterprise-wide nature of S&OP and IBP makes it difficult to deploy if we are only using the technology component.
Yeah. Mike, what's your take on this, doing the right things?
I think the weakness in any S&OP implementation is always people. It's always the lack of attendance, the lack of adherence. And I look back at my retail career, and if I'm entirely honest, we never referred to S&OP. It was never a term that we used. But we had meetings on a monthly cycle, a monthly cadence, talking about sales and stock and commercials and operations. And it fell over when, regardless of the tech, regardless of the process, it fell over when people simply didn't attend or attendance drifted. So I fully agree with Sandeep. Doing the right things works fantastically well, and tech is a deliverable or a platform to deliver against. Yeah. But it's the people that I think that tends to be where we succeed and fail. Without the people, without the process, the tech is simply a nice thing to have. I think deploying an S&OP piece of tech without having the process aligned or the people engaged is ultimately going to fail.
Yeah. No, I wrote a column about this, I think 8 years ago. So, you have 4 kind of meetings every month in the S&OP process: product review, demand review, supply review, financial consolidation. And I compared like a relay race. With the 4 of us, and you have 4 times 100 meters, and you have a baton, and you have a handover, etc. But with a relay race of 4 times 100 meters, at the end you have a finish and a finish line. But the thing is, with S&OP, this race should be run every month. So I think having a relay race every month, on and on and on, indefinitely. You have to stimulate people to join the relay race and to be motivated to do that.
Yeah, I'd argue as well. It's not a race in the sense of it's not a race to the finish.
No,
because it takes as long as it takes. But I think that your point is really valid. That it starts again every month, so it's a never-ending race. It's like it's a
Well,
never-ending track race.
for some companies, it is a race. So when I talk to some people involved, getting the data right, you have pre-S&OP meetings to get the forecasting right, this kind of data. So for a lot of companies and a lot of people I have spoken to, it felt like a race. There are deadlines. In that sense, I mentioned it is compared to a race. So maybe that's what I mean.
I think, Martijn, maybe we can compare it more to a F1 race rather than a relay race. Because if F1 teams, they can do 24 races in a calendar year, I think we can do 52 meetings or at least 12 meetings. And S&OP is not as complex as F1.
No. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good point. So why S&OP and you're moving into a digital supply chain era? So what is your take on that?
I think the objectives of S&OP, whether it is digital supply chains or the analog supply chain of past when S&OP started in the 1990s, is pretty much the same. It is about cross-functional alignment with a clear utilization of planning horizon and granularity to take decisions, and with the governance where executive sponsorship and participation are key. And also, it is very important to understand the difference between SNOE and S&OP, because the expectations from S&OP and decision making over the strategic and tactical horizon are completely different as compared to operational and executional. So if one of these elements is missing, it would be very difficult to get the value add out of your S&OP. If, for example, we don't do our decision making at right level of granularity, if we waste our time too much at SKU level or too much in reviewing and responding and firefighting, then we basically lose the essence of S&OP. Same thing around the planning horizons. If our focus of S&OP is purely operational, then we'll never be able to have a more anticipating way of working. We'll always be firefighting. So the objectives, they stay the same, but the way you achieve your objectives in the world of digital supply chains is much more easy, or I would say much more efficient, because you can bring different functions together. You can clean your data efficiently. You can do your reporting efficiently. So I would say the objectives, they remain the same. The way you achieve those objectives is a lot more easy than 10, 15, 20 years ago.
So yeah, you mentioned the planning horizon. What should be the ideal planning horizon for an S&OP meeting?
I think there is no ideal planning horizon. It depends from industry to industry, whether you are in retail or in distribution or in manufacturing. We have customers where the planning horizons, they are 12 months, whereas other customers where planning horizons are 5 years. So one of the customers is in commodity sourcing, precious metals. For them, the horizon is 5 years because they have to safeguard the sourcing of precious metals, whereas other customers that are in retail business, their strategic horizon stretches to 12 months. So I think it depends on what kind of business you are in, what kind of lead times you are accustomed to, what kind of industry you are in, how quickly your product is turning, what the catalog churn rate is. So there are a lot of factors to take into account before you set up your tactical and strategic horizon, and it will depend from one industry to another.
Yeah, but we see a clear distinction between S&OP, sales and operations planning, versus sales and operation execution. And you have a frozen period for your S&OE, and this frozen period that could also differ per industry. But there is a clear cut between the frozen period where, okay, this is what you want to have for the supply planning, and that makes sure that you can make it and can buy it and can deliver it. So there's a clear distinction between S&OE and S&OP in a matter of planning horizon.
Absolutely. So that frozen period, again, can be between 4 to 12 weeks. At least this is what I've seen. You might have some businesses where that frozen period is 4 weeks, whereas others, they stretch from 4 anywhere up to 12 weeks.
So to get clear about the definition of S&OP versus IBP, integrated business planning. So what is the difference in your opinion?
I think lot of businesses, they do IBP and they call it S&OP. Others they don't even do it S&OP and call it IBP. So it is also a little bit of understanding of what is behind. But the theoretical definition of S&OP, as the name says, it is aligning your basically sales and operations, whereas IBP is more enterprise-wide in nature. There is finance involved, there is strategy involved. In IBP, you can really bring in the financial performance into your decision making, whereas S&OP, it is basically your sales plans in volume and value, your demand, your supply, and your production and sourcing plans. So I would say the biggest difference between S&OP and IBP is this financial component, where you really transform the process into something that contributes to your financial performance. And I think this is what we'll see in the next slide.
Yeah, but before we get there, Mike, you have a retail background, and you mentioned that in the retail days, you were not mentioning the phrase S&OP. But still, you have a process with this kind of objectives, didn't you?
Yeah, listen, I think Sandeep's nailed it. I think your lead time dictates to what degree you're strategic or to what degree you're tactical or operational. And I always think when you're talking about IBP, we're really talking uber strategic. We're talking lead times beyond your typical lead time. And in my head, the way I could always reconcile how I refer to S&OP and S&OE and IBP is the further you become, the more strategic you become, the less you're talking about knowns. You're talking about things that don't exist. You're talking about initiatives, things that you can't even assign a product to. So I think that's a nice way of saying, from a strategic point of view, if I can define the product, then I'm not being strategic. I'm then looking at markets and entering new territories. And I always think what's nice about this is that, it's everything in this slide is new.
Sorry, I'm missing.
Sorry? Those that are executional are probably struggling and not going to see the black swans. Those that are purely strategic and not executional are probably not very efficient because they're only looking at strategic elements.
Okay, I got a question from the audience. So regarding the IBP definition, so in S&OP you have as in the fourth phase financial reconciliation. That's part of S&OP. How do we know it's not IBP? Yeah, to me, when we're in S&OP land, we talk about volumes basically, and in IBP you already talk about product margins, that kind of stuff. So you're already talking about in euros and in dollars. So that's my take on a clear definition between IBP and S&OP. Sandeep?
Yeah, I think again, the biggest difference I would say is that when you're talking about IBP, you're referring to your cash flow, your working capital efficiency, your return on assets. Whereas when we are doing the financial reconciliation in S&OP as stage 4 or stage 3, depending on what stage process the companies are following, we are basically looking at the alignment between the sales and the demand and the production plan. So to put it simply, in S&OP we can manage P&L, whereas in IBP we can manage P&L, cash flow, and the balance sheet of an organization.
Okay. So what are the biggest benefits of S&OP? Let's get into that area.
I think as we discussed, S&OP or IBP, they are basically in the biggest contributor or biggest benefit of S&OP IBP is return on capital employed. Because if you look at if you take the supply chain triangle approach, having a functional, dedicated, contributing S&OP means you have better availability, which means better service, and that translates into improved customer experience, which translates into improved revenue. Then you have basically you're doing it at probably less cost, and even if you are able to maintain your cost and you increase your revenue, you increase your EBIT. And then if you're able to achieve that EBIT with less dollars in your working capital because you have a handle on your inventory, it directly contributes to your return on capital employed. So I would say along with all the supply chain KPIs around cash conversion cycle, OTIF, forecast accuracy, forecast value add, the biggest contribution of S&OP is return on capital employed. And this is where the holistic approach helps, because then you can contribute to your income statement, to your cash flow statement, and to your balance sheet.
Yeah, no, I read a cheat sheet about S&OP. You know, a lot of points, etc. How to sell your S&OP process internally, especially to your CFO. My take always is, you know, use the language of the CFO. So you know, if you know where ROCE, return on capital employed, stands for, and if you know how to calculate it and how you can improve it, you already have a listening ear from the CFO. So that's my point. And here you're talking about financial lingo, I would say, and make sure that you understand it and how to improve it. And then you get the the support from finance, and I think hopefully also from the CEO. Mike, what's your take on that?
Lost me. I'll take it. Oftentimes we have these complaints from our customers that S&OP is a supply chain only process, and they are not able to convince the finance and the sales side to join. I think it's also because we don't speak the business language. If we go to the senior leadership and we tell them that we need enterprise-wide involvement to improve forecast accuracy or to decrease the inventory, will not get that buy-in. But when we speak the lingo the business speaks, and we say, we prove to them that the S&OP and its contribution is directly linked to return on assets or return on capital employed, the discussion becomes a lot more interesting.
So how do you know how to get there and what your maturity is? So, Mike?
I think for me, hopefully my microphone went dead for a moment. Sorry about that. So I think for me, we referenced before about a relay race, and I think it's a nice analogy that not so much from a relay race, but think about doing a marathon. I've done several marathons, not very fast. So the maturity assessment, it's not a beauty contest. We're not trying to see who's more mature and who's less mature. There's no vanity involved, but it's a way of us deciding how we can best transform that, or how we can accelerate the transformation journey to understand where you are from a baseline. And it's baseline assessment, benchmarking your readiness. And in that sense, there's no right or wrong level of maturity. It's simply a way for us to say, how can we accelerate that transformation without knowing where your starting point is? So again, using my marathon analogy, if I want to run a 3-hour marathon, well, I'm not going to start training running 6-minute miles if my baseline fitness is horrendously bad. We have to nuance and tailor the journey you go on relative to where you are in terms of your performance. So this first thing of benchmarking your S&OP readiness on a scale of 1 to 4 is incredibly important. Because if you can do that, you can then look at how different parts of your business, different elements of your business have different perceptions of maturity. And I always think perception is always a really keen word when we talk about S&OP or business in general, because people generally have a higher perception of where they are, or they overestimate rather than underestimate. And obviously sales guys, there's more nuance there entirely. But the reason we do an assessment of maturity is simply to get a fast track on that journey to get to where we want to be, whether that's a different maturity from the sales guys, different maturity from the marketing or finance. But until we can measure, we can't manage. Until we measure and manage, we can't improve. So it's that 3-stage step of benchmarking, understanding different perceptions, and then building an improvement plan. And I think Sandeep mentioned at the start of the meeting, and businesses tend to focus on the technology as the big driver and the big influencer of S&OP, and they tend to pay less attention. And sometimes the people and the behaviors are where projects or where S&OP journeys fall down, because people aren't ready or the behaviors aren't in place. So as much as we need people, process, technology, and governance, I think the people and the behavior are as important, if not more important.
Sandeep, what do you think?
I think when we when we embark on a S&OP transformation journey, it is very important to set the baseline. It is very important to know where we are, what the as-is is, what the opportunities are, what the pain points are. And as Mike mentioned, it is not a beauty contest. If we are at stage 2 or stage 3 and not stage 5, there is nothing wrong with it. So it's very important to know where we are and how we can get to where we want to be. Having a baseline gives you a clear understanding of as is versus best in class or benchmarks. And then it is very also relatively easy to have a 2B, a roadmap and an action plan to get to that 2B. But it's very important to understand where we are, what that baseline is before embarking on any journey.
Yeah. You know, on the last line, you state, you know, top level sponsorship is needed. My trick question is, you know, do the CEO really know where S&OP stands for? So do they know where the acronym stands for, or IBP? And you know, if the answer is no, you don't have real top level sponsorship. And I think, you know, maybe you have to have top level attendance. So especially in the IBP phases, when you talk about finance, CFO or even the CEO should be involved on the highest level with the most important decisions. So what's your take? When do you have top level sponsorship, and when do you don't have it, Mike?
I think
so yeah,
it's for Mike.
No, Sandeep, go ahead.
So if you look at the first tick, it says organization tend to pay less attention to people and behaviors, right? If the top management does not have skin in the game, S&OP implementation would be very difficult. And I'll share with you a personal example, which is very concrete, of how we did with one of in one of my previous employers. And it was way back in 2008, 2009. Our CEO at that time sent a memo to all the management committees of all the business units. And when I'm saying business units, more than 60 of it, that a certain percentage of their Mancom's yearly bonus is linked to forecast accuracy and inventory, which means if in the management committee you have CEO, CCO, CMO, CIO, COO, then only their bonus is linked with inventory and forecast accuracy. And all of a sudden, CMO and CCO, they had skin in the game. Yeah. Which means the KPIs, they had shared KPIs, they had shared goals, and all of a sudden delivering on forecast accuracy and inventory to start with was a key incentive to basically change those behaviors. So the way to bring in executive participation, I'm not saying sponsorship, participation, is to have skin in the game, is to have shared KPIs, and to make people responsible for the consequences of their actions. Because if a CCO does not really care about inventory, will be able to hit the top line, but will never be able to hit the bottom line, because the costs related to that inventory will basically erode the profit, right, or the margins. So I would say without a skin in the game, without shared KPIs, it is difficult to foster executive participation.
Mike, what do you think?
I think, going back to your point about sometimes the CEO might not know what S&OP stands for, I don't think that's really a concern. I think what they do know is what the value it brings, and they're strategic and they're commercial and they're oriented by value and profit. And I think it's a bit like when we all went through a learning curve probably 2 or 3 years ago, when we had Teams was pushed to us and lots of videos were cameras on. It was mandatory. It only takes 1 or 2 people to turn their cameras off before everybody turns their cameras off. So this thing about participation and adherence, you have to see the value of being there first and foremost. If you don't see the value of being there, you have to be there, and you have to be told to be there. And I think I would always question somebody who doesn't see the value of an S&OP cycle and a monthly cadence, and who doesn't want to be there and doesn't want to commit anything, yet is happy to take the bonus at the end of the year. And I think whenever I've sat in S&OP meetings, S&OP or whatever I called them in my retail days, they were fractious. There were arguments. There were debates. It wasn't always a happy place where people are high-fiving each other. And that's how it should be, but it has to be led by high-level sponsorship. Until you see the value of being there, you're generally told to be there. And I think even you mentioned at the start of the meeting that the most difficult person to kind of convert is the sales guy, because they're probably less likely to want to commit anything. But actually, they'll probably see that one of the largest value of the S&OP cycle is the sales guys and what they get out of it. So sometimes you've got to find the balance between sponsorship, participation, adherence, and simply telling people that it's a monthly cycle you need to attend and your attendance is mandatory.
So I got a question for the audience. So what is the frequency you recommend for finance and S&OP to meet as part of it? And especially if you got to talk to IBP, but
my view is the cadence is monthly and everybody is the same cadence. Now, whether you're involved in the pre-S&OP but I think that individual meeting, if you're not involved and you're not there and you don't see the value of being there, I'd argue that you're missing out.
So maybe to get it on the next slide. So how do you do it? Because I have also some observation about some phases in the S&OP meetings. So Mike, so how do you do it?
Well, I think in terms of getting the readiness or the understanding where people are on their kind of maturity cycle, I think, and nobody likes surveys or questions, but unfortunately, the only way to get this is to engage with the people and have a questionnaire, a survey, 100, in this case, 110 questions that we decide how mature you are on a 1 to 5 cycle. And as I said, this is not a blame or a vanity contest of who's ready and who's not ready. And it's lots of questions around culture, focus, portfolio, software, communication. It's all the questions we'd ask our team. And it's a little bit, I'd argue, it's a little bit dry. It's a little bit of a dry process, but it's such an important part of the S&OP process in terms of accelerating that journey you go on, is to have questions and ask the team to ascertain whether there's the same readiness across the whole piece, or is it specific functions or specific departments that are fully ready and perhaps others are less so. But it is a necessary evil, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what I see here, product and portfolio. So the first phase of an S&OP process is product review or portfolio review. I think a lot of companies are missing out that important phase. So I talk to a lot of companies and they don't have a portfolio analysis on product and customer profitability. So basically creating a matrix on product and customer profitability. And to get there, you need the help of finance, because when you especially want to do this portfolio analysis on SKU level, you have to have cost allocation on SKU level, etc. But basically, it's to rationalize and to clean up your portfolio every month, not yearly, every month. You need to have an in-depth portfolio analysis as part of S&OP, and I see a lot of companies are struggling with that. So basically, there you need the input of finance to get to the point: what is my customer profitability and my product profitability? So Sandeep, don't you see that as a hurdle in a lot of S&OP processes?
Absolutely, and there is a reason why the portfolio review is first step in any S&OP or IBP cycle. It's because if different functions are not aligned on what product catalog we are planning for across different horizons, it would be a difficult exercise, right? So you mentioned on one side this notion of product profitability and customer profitability, but also on the other side, if I don't know what I'm going to launch, what my NPI phasing is, what my promos are, what my event forecast is, or what SKUs I'm going to discontinue, or what is going to be substituted, it would be very difficult for me to go to the next step, which is the demand review, right? So if we are not very efficient in our product or portfolio review, then rest of the S&OP basically will not deliver the value that we expect, because we'll always have gaps in the bucket from which we'll basically lose value.
And you mentioned a survey to start with to have a assessment of maturity, and it's all about change management. It's all about transformation. And I think for change management, change managers do all know this. You need the assessment of the readiness. So in any major change within a company, you should have an assessment. How ready are my people? And I think that's the good point of getting an assessment of your maturity. So,
and it's also a sliding scale. I think readiness is, it's not a binary, are we ready or are we not ready? Again, and lots of exercise analogies here, but when someone says to me, what's the best exercise to do? The first question I would ask somebody is, what are you currently doing? Because if you're doing nothing, then anything's better than what you're currently doing. Yeah. So it's not a, are we ready or are we not ready? It's to what degree are we ready, and how can we fast track that transition from being where we are to where we're going?
Yeah. And I think a good point mentioned here, the process mapping, S&OP is a decision-making process. So, by definition, you should map out this process to make sure, are you ticking all the boxes, and is it that we want in the usual in the status we are in, and do we want it in the future, or should we evolve, etc., with scenario planning? So that's also important. Getting next, so we mentioned already the maturity model. So maybe Mike, you can take it through this.
Yeah, so this is the typical the Gartner maturity map, where there's essentially 5 stages, and we tend to find that stage 1, 2, and 3 are where we see most of established S&OP companies or customers, and they react, they anticipate, they integrate. They're not the low-hanging fruit, but they're certainly the easier to get to. And I think what we tend to find is perhaps very few get to collaborate and orchestrate for one of 2 reasons. Either they choose not to because they're comfortable in their industry that an integrated supply chain is enough to deliver the value they want, or perhaps the jump to get to collaborate and orchestrate is difficult in the sense of it's like the marginal gains to take the extra step of a very, very small gain is a large cost attached to it, whether that's a cost of resource or cost of mindset. I think it's always stage 3 is not a bad place to be. Getting to stage 4 and getting to stage 5 is utopia, and not many companies get there. Sandeep, would you agree?
I think stage 5 is not a holy grail everybody should aspire for. If I'm happy and I'm delivering value to my business by being at stage 3, and then if the cost benefit analysis is not favorable to move from stage 3 to stage 4, it's better to stay on stage 3, right? Because in the end, if the incremental cost of moving from stage 3 to stage 4 is higher than the benefits that I'm adding to the business, then I'm basically taking a step back, not step forward.
Yeah. So getting back to the definition of Gartner, and I've been through all these articles by Gartner. The stage 5 of orchestrate means, as a company, as a manufacturing company, you also optimize the profitability of your main suppliers and your main customers. So basically, you are optimizing the profitability of your whole supply chain end to end. That's the Valhalla area of stage 5, and considering a lot of supply chain competing with each other, so you may not get there, and may not want to get there. And in stage 4, what I see, when you get to the phase of IBP with financial planning interface and the product profitability, customer profitability, people from finance would say this kind of process looks a lot of our monthly financial planning analysis process. So, and then you get to the burden of integrating this S&OP into IBP, into financial planning and analysis. So you get one process from finance. So that could be also massive undertaking, I would say. Don't you agree, Mike?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's also, I think back to my career, I think there's a degree where people didn't really want to collaborate because sharing information was often seen as there was a risk attached to it. And I think that's a little bit short-term thinking on behalf of retailers. But if you want to fully collaborate, you have to do exactly that. And there's always that nervousness that you're sharing something that might in the end go against you, or you might be sharing secrets. And I always think S&OP, it's as much a mindset as it is a process or a journey, that the way you think, the way you operate, the way you kind of things manifest for you, it has to be a mindset based process, if you like, rather than simply being what we saw at the start of the meeting, people holding their cards close to their chest and being afraid to share because they don't want to be scrutinized and challenged.
Yeah. And Sandeep, in the fourth stage of collaborate, we are talking about scenarios and different kind of scenario planning, and you need some tools for that probably, and you have to think differently. Is that also a hurdle to get from stage 3 to 4 to get into just thinking of scenarios?
Before going into scenarios, just building on Mike's point on stage 4, I think a lot of businesses tend to collaborate more upstream than downstream. And this is where also orchestration becomes a little bit difficult, because orchestration or stage 4 to stage 5 journey happens only when we have both upstream and downstream understanding of what can derail my plans from my customer side and from my supplier side. And then on stage 4, scenario planning becomes, between stage 3 to stage 4, scenario planning becomes a key value add, because in stage 3, we are forecasting for products. We are forecasting for revenue. In stage 4, we are basically planning for outcomes. You mentioned that disruptions are the new normal. They are here to stay. So when you are a stage 4 organization, you are not basically planning for a top line or bottom line. Of course you are, but you're also planning for the outcomes, how that top line will be impacted if this or that happens. Very fair to say that scenario stage 4, it basically is linked directly to your scenario planning capability, or how do you integrate digital twins in your planning capabilities.
So getting back to the S&OP phase now, call it stage 3. So how does it look like? How do we know that we are fine doing our things we are doing? So Sandeep, how do you call best class S&OP?
So when you look at S&OP is there since 1990s, and there are a lot of players out there in CPG, in automotive. They have nailed it, and they are using S&OP to their advantage. And when you look at those organizations, they have certain characteristics, which means that the first one is that their plans are mathematically linked, which means any change in the sales plan, financial plan, has a direct impact on their, let's say, sourcing plan. To give you an example, a customer, when they plan to open 10 more doors in Asia, and most of their sourcing is in Italy, they can easily understand what will be the impact on their raw material, packaging component sourcing just by opening these 10 new doors in Asia. So this is what we call mathematically integrated plans. Coordinated cross-functional teams, where the role and responsibilities are clearly defined, and also we understand who contributes to quantitative planning and who contributes to qualitative planning. In most of the cases, when we are talking about, let's say, demand planning, the role of commercial and marketing teams is qualitative planning. The quantitative, the statistical, the baseline forecasting, it is within the supply chain realm. Then the next one is clear governance. What is expected from different functions? What do they bring to the table? What do they contribute? The stability of operational plan. These organizations, most of them who have nailed S&OP, have either production in-house or they work with contract manufacturers. So they need a certain kind of stability upstream, even though there is variation in their demand plans. So stability is very important. And then last but not the least, root cause capability. Every S&OP or executive S&OP review starts with the performance review. So we need to understand if our budget was 10 million and we did 12, where is it coming from? Or if we didn't meet our budget and we only did 8, then where is it coming from, right? So these are the features basically when you survey best-in-class S&OP organization, you tend to see that most of them, they have these kind of capabilities.
All right. And Mike, something to add from your side?
I think it's some, Sandy mentioned governance, and I think we always talk about people, process, technology, and I think governance for me is one of the most important parts of any S&OP cycle, because without the governance, the risk is your business becomes organic and tends to be heading in directions that are perhaps suboptimal. But I like these 5 elements, and I think back again in my retail career, and although we never referred to it as S&OP, we'd always do a root cause capability analysis of looking back and seeing what we achieved versus what we expected, and using that to then half look forward. So I think it's a nice kind of progression from having a plan that's linked mathematically, and then being able to look back and say, well, we thought we'd do this and we saw something else. And we talked at the start of this meeting about what defines whether a customer or a company is ready for S&OP. And I think, is it complexity? Is it size? Is it mindset? And I'd argue that every company is ready for S&OP, with a very few exceptions. And I think this is quite a nice slide showing how you might not need all of these S&OP best-in-class features, but it kind of covers off 99% of them.
Yeah. So I get a question from the audience, should we wait department function to be ready for S&OP, or should we involve them? I've learned, to get a tipping point, to get a change happen, 25% of the audience of your employees should embrace it and believe in it. If you have 25% of your people believe in it and work with it, it will happen. So if you find the right people within sales and finance who believe in it, I think change will happen and S&OP will happen. So that's my take on how to involve all the people needed in an S&OP before you using a stick. So what do you think, Mike?
I think with people, if you're not ready for it, then perhaps you're not the right person. I think you're
right. Yeah,
you can make a person as ready as they can be, but if they don't buy into it and they're fundamentally opposed to it, then perhaps they're not the right person to, what's the phrase? You can lead a horse to water. Yeah. So I think sometimes you have to accept that you either toe the line, or perhaps the line isn't for you, and you need to find the right person, and that might not be you.
No, and on the bottom you see all kind of KPIs, OTIF, and order cycle time. And I think production plan adherence, that's an important thing. I think especially in manufacturing, I see a lot of companies don't look at it in the right way, also when they're looking back at last month. So that's also something to discuss next to the financial points. Getting next, we're getting closer to the end of the webinar. We have 2 slides to go. So it is a journey. Mike, can you tell us how this journey looked like, and how do you know where you're at and where you will be going?
Yeah, so the complexity here, I guess, this is a typical journey where your starting point is that disconnected management process, where yes, you're perhaps having anecdotal conversations with colleagues, you're in firefighting mode, you're responding, you're not proactive. The teams are working in silos, and they're not working against each other, but they're certainly not working in harmony with each other. And that's typically the starting point we see. But I go back to my point earlier that to take the journey, to take the first step in the journey is the most important, most difficult step. So the fact that we see a disconnected management process at the start, the fact that we define that within our maturity assessment is good, because that's kind of the owning up to the fact that you have a problem that you need to fix. And then moving into the kind of the second part of phase A, which is more around having the correct foundations, where you've got the shared accountability, or you've got the KPIs defined, and you're doing some of the right things, but perhaps not all the right things. You're still looking at demand and supply, but not quite strategically. You're more looking at it from a tactical point of view, and you're kind of breaking that silo mentality, but not quite fully. And then as you progress on that journey, you then become more kind of integrated. You're then having much more visibility of your horizons, be that your tactical or your strategic. You're then having, baked in accountability, where decisions that are being made with a level of governance. So it's still not, it's certainly not stage 5 or stage 4. But I'd argue that when you get to that capable integrated S&OP and beyond into advanced S&OP, that's probably the easiest of those steps. The advanced S&OP, where you're looking at making decisions that are strategically driven, and the team's all pulling in the same direction. I think that's where we see a lot of companies stop. And then when you get into the kind of the last 2 stages, the fully integrated S&OP and we call this the high maturity, the nirvana, I think that's where, as Sandeep said, that's where the cost of those jumps are perhaps the largest cost. The benefits might be there, but not. The benefits certainly don't outweigh the cost. But I think this is a nice way of saying wherever you are on this journey, simply being on that journey is a big step in the right direction. So I'd argue that And I said back in the start of this meeting, there's no vanity involved here. It's not a case of saying, I wish I was at stage 3, but I'm at stage 1, therefore I'm a failure. The transformation is a journey. And as you say, it's a relay race that never ends. It's perpetual, it's constant, it's a cadence that is never ending. Yeah. So I think it's a nice way of saying whether you're in phase A and you're a little bit disconnected, or you're in phase B, but you're at the advanced S&OP stage, but your aspiration is to go fully integrated or to the nirvana. I think until you can measure, you can't manage. Until you can manage, you can't improve. And that comes from knowing where you are on your particular journey.
So I did a workshop with the whole management team and the board of a CPG company, European CPG company, a whole day, and we talked about supply chain 2025. And at the end of this day, the CEO came to me and he asked me, Martin, where can we apply machine learning? And I asked the CEO, so what does this machine want to learn? And based on what data and why? And there was no answer. But so he was talking about nirvana, but the company clearly was not ready for it. So we hear a lot about AI and ML in supply chain, but I think it's rightly stated here. For a lot of companies, it is nirvana, and it will stay nirvana. So don't look at this shiny object too much. So what's your take on this nirvana and AI and ML in S&OP, Sandeep?
No, I think you said it right. We can use the word nirvana. We can use the word holy grail. If I'm moving from, let's say, disconnected management processes, and I have reached a capable and integrated stage, and I'm adding value to the business, I might not need to reach nirvana. It will be waste of my time, effort, and energy, because the time that is needed to find use cases for ML and AI, get the data ready, get the organization ready for it, versus the benefits I get from it, probably it's not worth it. So what is very important is for us to know where we stand, where we have to go, with a clear eye on how we can contribute to the financial performance of our business. And if we can contribute to a right level just by being at stage 3 or stage 4, then that is more than enough. And it's not a beauty contest, right? We don't have to be stage 5, everyone.
No. And a lot of the software, even Slim4, the software of Slimstock, is using AI by recognizing patterns on an SKU basis based on a year of statistics. That's the base of statistical forecast. So in essence, it's already used in some parts. So that's also to be clear. And this kind of software is also learning from statistic of the last year. To wrap up, so I created this slide a few years ago. So basically saying you have different layers of technology. Of course, you have ERP since the late 90s, and then on top of that you have S&OE, what we call S&OE right now. So people ask me, is S&OE available as a software solution? No, it's basically made up by WMS, TMS, inventory management, order management, and you name it. And on top of that, you have your S&OP, and you can discuss it, but maybe in my opinion, you have an IBP layer and a solution for that purpose. And then on top of that, you end to end, and then you took a look at the market demand and market supply, and basically this is how more mature companies are creating a stack of applications and creating a conversion planning tower. So this is only stating to see, okay, there are different layers of supply chain solutions. So don't try to push it all into your ERP. A lot of companies are putting off their ERP engine. So this is what I say. Your take before we get to the Q&A is, Sandeep, on this final slide.
I think it might come across as counterintuitive coming from a software vendor or a IT company. I'm a firm believer that you can have the most advanced technology in the world, but if you don't sort out the people and process side of the equation, value add to the financial performance would be very difficult. And a lot of people, they are hiding behind we cannot deliver performance because we don't have technology. I think that is a fake excuse. there are so many billions of dollars that are being invested in technology, and still supply chains are struggling. So it's for me a people and process problem, a governance problem, and not a technology problem.
Yes, so unfortunately we are a bit out of time, but we have 1 minute to go. But the good part is we have an extra 30 minutes right after this. So, and I've already asked a lot of questions from the audience to Mike and Sandeep. So, if you want to have a further conversation with the three of us right after this, so you will welcome to join us in the virtual lounge. So basically, you can sit at table 1 and have a direct conversation with the three of us. So to wrap it all up, so here are the links of some more information. So a link to our IT supplement map, also a link to the S&OP Readiness Scorecard by Slimstock, also an interesting white paper, how to get from strategy to execution, with a lot of interesting analogy with Columbus, and just launched last year, a book by Slimstock, Building Blocks of S&OP, with a lot of information about what we discussed today. So wrapping all up, for the audience, thank you for listening in, and thank you for all the questions, way more than we can handle at this moment. And Sandeep, thank you for joining me in this webinar. Thank you for your insights.
Thanks for having us, Martijn.
And Mike, also from my side, thank you for your retail insights, and thank you for joining us.
No, it's pleasure. Pleasure.
All right. Again, I hope you joined, liked it, and please join us in the lounge if you have further questions. If not, thanks for now, and maybe I see you later in another webinar, and see you later. Bye-bye, and goodbye.